behind schedule. So this is a roundtable discussion. It's a two-part roundtable. The first part of this roundtable, I want to discuss what everyone here and out there in internet land is doing with OS2 these days, how you're using it, at whatever flavor of OS2, whether it's Warp 4, whether it's eComStation, whether it's ArcaOS, whether it's OS2 2.0 or OS2 1.0. I want to know what you're doing with it right now. The next part of our session tomorrow will be what you envision doing with it in the future, or what you would like to do with it in the future. So, anyone care to start? Matt, you're a good one.
Okay, great. So actually, I've been regularly using classic versions of OS2 in a virtual, I don't know how to describe this project. It's called 86box. Unlike a typical virtual VM program like VMware and that sort of thing, this type of product actually recreates the experience of building hardware from the 90s. It actually gives you a list of different components you could put together, sound cards, motherboards, etc. And you can recreate a classic experience. Well, I'm kind of unofficially part of a group on Discord where we're testing various bits of hardware, putting OS2 on these virtual configurations, because it's a good way to sort of battle test if this hardware is actually how it would behave in the real world. And if any bugs come up, OS2 is great for throwing up those syserror logs. So we know, great, okay, that shouldn't have happened because the real hardware would have done this, not this. And then we, just take note of that and then go back through and try to debug it.
So what's the goal of the project ultimately?
Well, to basically be that one-stop shop for those that want to experience 90s hardware but without having to invest in purchasing aging hardware.
Okay.
But with the classic OS2, there might actually be situations where you may have OS2 software that you'd like to run, but you don't have the exact hardware configuration to run that on. Having the ability to say put OS2 2.1 in a virtual box that you completely curated to within an inch of itself to be able to run. That's what we're aiming for.
Okay. Good deal. Mike, do you have a particular use for OS2 these days? Now that they've done away with standard VGA ports at school, it's tough to make use of it in your day-to-day work.
Most of the time I'm using the chalkboard, so I have some presentation software I throw in class, but I'm using OpenOffice and Describe in a browser most of the time, some graphics programs.
Okay.
I'm a college professor.
So when you write out things for your students to hand out, what word processor are you using?
Describe.
On OS2.
Oh yeah. Okay. No, well,
ArcaOS.
That's what it boots to, and
for purposes of this discussion,
it's the same thing.
We're consider us to be distribution agnostic. Okay.
So
I'm not up here to sell ArcaOS licenses.
I'm just trying to say I'm booting the latest thing that I can.
Okay. But you're using it for productivity. In your day-to-day job.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
great.
I write lab manuals for students and.
Excellent.
And I do I write my own old HTML website, which all my lecture notes and stuff and labs go on, and they have to download it. And there I'm using, I think, NetOp to throw things up and down.
Okay. NetOp for remote control.
Yeah.
Okay. Instead of VNC. Have you tried the newer VNC from Andrei Vasilkin? It will be in the next ArcaOS release in 5.1.1, and it's Ultra VNC compatible, so it performs very well, and it handles a lot of clipboard things better than the older VNC server port. So if you're doing any kind of Unicode copying and pasting between the, you know, if you're on a machine that's doing Unicode and you need to paste back and forth through an OS2
it'll
box,
take care of them.
it does better, yeah.
A couple years ago, we were working with a group in Juniata College doing a lot of next-gen sequencing. And so that was all done on the server. So it was, you know, you can either pay lots of money and have a low learning curve, or you know, get free stuff with this high learning curve.
Right.
So, but OS2 is beaut, because I could just use like an FTP stuff and that, and then had a telnet session open and talk with the server, and it was beaut under OS2.
Yeah.
I could position all the windows around, and but that server went down, and they're not running that anymore.
No.
So you know, but it was beaut.
There are some interesting things that I find that I can do with the TCP/IP stack in OS2 that can be downright klutzy to do on anything else. So for instance, I used to configure a lot of routers. And it's very simple to snap a router into the local switch sitting on my desk while I'm connected to my network. Add an alias to my wired LAN interface on the same network as the default network in the router that I'm configuring. Log into that router in a browser or a telnet session or something, configure it, set it all up, put it on the correct network that's supposed to be, as long as it doesn't conflict with my network. Either add another alias or delete and then add the new alias, reboot the router box in the meantime, and then get right back into it without losing my connection to my own LAN. That's not so easy to do under any other operating system.
Trust you on that.
Yeah, it's just one of those weird things.
Well, I will say with OpenOffice, I need it. Everything sends me all this Microsoft stuff. And I need, and that's the presentation I do, and that's what I do for church. I do it under OpenOffice and take it to church for the songs.
And OpenOffice works for you. Have you used LibreOffice?
No, just have open for.
There are some interesting differences between OpenOffice and LibreOffice.
Is there a Libre for OS2?
There is no Libre for OS2, nor will there ever be.
That's what I mean. I boot OS2. And
right. Yeah, so if you're only using OS2, OpenOffice is it in terms of modern Office suites. And it works really well. There are some Microsoft Office files that still give OpenOffice difficulty.
Yeah.
And they've worked around a lot of that in LibreOffice. There are essentially a lot more people working on Libre than there are working on OpenOffice these days. But you know, that's the nature of the open source community.
Right.
You know?
That's what I do. I'm done.
Joe?
Nothing.
Busy year. Haven't spent a lot of time on it. I took to the 5.1s and put one on a laptop, one on a desktop. Did my accounting, my personal accounting stuff on one of them, and for my tax returns. And did some work on OpenOffice. I aspire to. I hope for the moment when I get an HTML5 compliant browser, which looks like it'll never happen, because then I could go back and use it as my major work machine, because I would get on through I could use, I think I could still access my Citrix system, VPN, use that through that.
Okay.
You know what the odds are on that at this point. So, I have not had a chance to do a lot of work on updating those two things. I also would like to put either one of the older 5.0 or 5.1 in a virtual box on a new machine I built. I have not had the time to do that.
Okay.
So that's the way it's been.
Okay. All right. But you were using OS2 for those things.
I use eTeller for, I mean, the printer aspect of it it drives me nuts. I use eTeller for my personal tax stuff, my personal records. I have an account which is I
That's a
use
good idea.
one checking account which is dedicated to giving charitable contributions, and I
Mhm.
list everything through there and on e-teller. I've got a couple other accounts that set with that too. I use that every year to do my tax return.
Mhm.
And then I do some work, letter writing, stuff like that, in an open office.
Okay.
That's pretty much what I'm doing right now on it, not a lot, because I just don't have any time, so.
Understood, understood. Okay, thank you. You wanna hand that back to David
I do.
and we'll put him on the spot? I mean, ask him?
I did.
So I, many years ago, was a developer in OS2. I worked at a company called Prodigy, which I don't know, maybe some of you know what that was. And
We
used
all
to-
remember modems in this room.
Yeah. Well, actually, the modems were managed by what were they? You know, the microchannel machines, and they would run 250 some modems on each box, running OS2. So, and then I got a job at Bankers Trust because I knew OS2, and I was working on a big commercial syndicated lending software for a few years. And they gradually, the thing got ported to Windows, and then the OS2 kind of, died down. So,
Mhm.
and since then I just basically play with it. And I retired last year, so now I'm kind of interested in doing maybe some projects with you guys. And I've been looking
Right.
at the website. That's kind of interesting to
Mhm.
me. And I tried, at Lewis's suggestion, I pulled down the OpenVPN code and started to try to work on that, but it's a headache.
It has a lot of
That's one thing.
dependencies.
Development is really difficult. I don't know whose responsibility it is to make it easier, like to find stuff, to know how to do anything, what to install. Maybe I missed the secret webpage that explains all that, but
It's,
I spend so much time trying to figure that stuff out.
we have a wiki page on the
Yeah,
Arc
actually, I
Malware,
did find that. Yeah.
and that's sort of a starting point,
Mhm.
but obviously there are a number of gaps. And there is no cohesive, this is how you build such and such. And other than our guidance as to what compiler may be better suited for one thing or another, there's nothing else really around to tell you, well, if you want to build a device driver, this is what you ought to use. Or if you want to port something from Linux that's already building on Linux and Cygwin on Windows, this is what you want to use.
Yeah,
So-
I thought about trying to compile a list of the things I had to do, like what to install. That was the first thing.
Right.
And it took a couple Warpstocks before I got all that stuff working. And then, then I was trying to use CMake, because the OpenVPN project uses CMake, among other reasons. And, like OS2 World is pretty useful, but I'm not a natural user of those kind of environments.
Forum
I like to
environments.
ask.
Web forums.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I'll see how much luck I have over the next year.
Have you subscribed to the Warp technical list on groups.io?
No. Now that would be another useful thing. What is all that stuff? How do you find that out? I've never heard of that before.
All right, so we need to do, we don't have time for an ad hoc session today, but we have space for an ad hoc session tomorrow.
Uh-huh.
So let's throw something together about a list of online resources
That'd be really
for
useful.
the community. Sure.
And I did on OS2 World, I got answers fairly quickly. There's some guy named Yo or Yao or something.
Dave Yo.
Yeah,
Yep.
he was really helpful right away. He answered my question. Some
Yeah.
weird compiler switch.
And I run a mailing list, the new ports,
Uh-huh.
GNU ports mailing list. And Dave is on there, and
Yeah.
Paul's on there, and most people who are actually using GCC are on there.
Yeah, and I'm a C++ programmer, so GCC is the better thing for me because
Mhm.
those other compilers, the C++ is so out of date in those things that, it's hard to
Well,
compile.
it depends on what you're compiling. If you're working on stuff that was written for VAC, then VAC
Well,
is
yeah, but no, current software,
Yes, new
But
stuff.
C++ has moved along since like Open Wacom, that is really missing a lot of stuff in C++. It's a great environment, it would be great to be able to use it, but the STL is missing half the pieces. And
I don't know if it's that way on all platforms. It may just be like that on OS 2.
no, it's on all.
Is it?
Some genius decided to rewrite the STL. It's unbelievable somebody did that, but you know, there were versions they could have adapted to use
Right.
with it, and that would have been available. So,
Shame.
Yeah.
anyway, Jeffrey?
You want to hand that over to Jeff?
I missed the question. What are we
The,
doing?
so what we're discussing, and this is a two-part roundtable discussion. Today's part deals with what you're doing with OS 2, any flavor of OS 2, today. Tomorrow's part of the discussion is what you envision yourself doing with OS 2, again, any flavor of OS 2, in the future, or what you would like to do with it in the future. So today is what you're doing now with OS 2.
So I came to OS 2 because I was sick of waiting for my print queue to empty in DOS.
When you were printing from WordStar.
So, that's right, printing from WordStar. And
Jeff
on
is
286
indeed one of the sole remaining aficionados of WordStar.
We had somebody last year. Who was that?
Was there someone else last year?
Someone
who
last
was-
also currently uses WordStar.
Currently uses WordStar.
Yes.
I don't remember
He
who
sat
that.
in the left in the back.
I don't remember who
Did
that
you
was.
form a user group?
So there were user groups. Everybody's dead now.
Oh.
So anyway, I heard about this wonderful program, and that was basically, I had it on one machine. It was my production machine, just using OS through, loading 37 disks and machine and things like that. So, and that was very successful. I have a lot of old software aside from WordStar that I use, and I have these around. I have a lot of old printers, HP printers, for which you can't get modern drivers, because in the old days people made things to last. So then I had an accident a few years back and I lost my OS 2 machine, but I haven't had a running machine for several years now. It's going to run this afternoon for the first time.
Okay.
So my purpose in using OS 2 is to give me a software mechanism which allows me to use all my old programs and all of my old hardware, but at the same time be embedded using the virtual machine mechanism in an OS. And when I grow up, I want to learn Linux. I'll use a Linux bed for it, but now I got it on some Windows machines. So, and then I can have modern browsers, and I can do some things which you can't do with the old software. But my life is complicated. I'm involved in a lot of things. I run a business. I volunteer for a lot of stuff. I'm writing a book, and
you're writing your book in WordStar.
in WordStar. So you do the first draft in WordStar, and then when I prepare it for publication.
But currently you're not running WordStar under any version of OS 2. You're
No.
running WordStar on Windows.
Yes, Windows.
So currently you're not using OS 2, but you'd like to get back to using OS 2.
So it's going to be in my suitcase when I go to Bangkok for a month, and I'm going to run the two machines in parallel. And there are these wonderful programs in OS like PM View. It's just great. Yeah.
Still the best image viewer ever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but what are you going to use in place that? You have to bring up
That one's
OS
almost
2.
essential.
So, but I'll have two machines running, and I'll gradually move everything back to OS 2. But for example, with WordStar, so somebody gave me a Windows 10 64-bit machine. You can't run WordStar in a 64-bit machine. It just says that we can't run the 16-bit code.
16-bit subsystem has been removed
Yeah, so
already.
I just, so anyway, that's what I do. I
Okay.
just think it's a wonderful thing, and I think there are probably a lot of people like me who got old stuff, they want to keep going, they want to throw things out. You got all the drivers, you got all the cables, and it fits with my way of life.
Does WordStar, there was an OS 2 version of it ever?
No, there was never.
No.
No, but you can run
DOSBox?
You don't need DOSBox with ArcaOS 5.1.
You need to-
And
Run it
above.
straight in the native
Run it
DOS.
Run it right under the VDM, because the VDM works beautifully.
That's what I mean, the DOS window, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what you mean.
DOSBox is an emulator
Yeah,
application.
wrong term.
Right. Martin, were you going to jump in at this point?
Who's next?
Or we're going to hand it off to
Oh, is
Alex?
that what, am I
Yeah,
next?
yeah.
Okay, so I was wondering what this. what you
I mean,
were giving me.
I'm flexible.
Yeah, so, honestly, mostly I use it for developing for ArcaOS. That's the single biggest thing I use it for.
So when you word process, Alex, what do you use?
I don't use word processors in my personal life that much, honestly. At work, you know, we use the usual work, right? Well, in my day job, office job, we work.
And you've discovered Google Docs and the.
Google Docs, I would hesitate to call a word processor. It's a rich text editor, which is very useful. Okay, as a sort of budget
It
office,
processes words.
It's
It
what?
processes words. That's
Yeah.
it's affiliated.
As a
with
budget
words.
office suite, it is very useful, and it's particularly useful for like sharing documents and putting up collaborative documents and so on. It used to work fairly well under our web browsers on OS2. Sadly, it does not work so well anymore. I did actually my presentations for Warpstock in Google Docs, just so you know. But no, the main thing I use OS2 for these days, other than my ArcaOS development, is for my personal applications. I developed some applications in Qt4. I find OS2 is a great environment for just doing Qt development there. And also I have certain applications that I always run on OS2, such as, anybody familiar with a password manager called eAccounts? Or EAC? It's written, I think it's written in like Dr. Dialog or something. But it's an encrypted password manager. For years I've kept all my passwords in it. But I need to access my passwords when I'm not at home sometimes. So what do I do about that?
You store them in the
Everybody's-
cloud, of course.
That's what everybody tells me. Just use a cloud-based
Just
password
use the
manager.
cloud.
For some reason, I
What
just
could
don't
go
really,
wrong?
Yeah, I just don't feel entirely comfortable storing my passwords in the cloud. One of the things I do, and I mentioned this in my presentation last year, I got a Synology NAS for my home network. It has a VPN server on it. So I have my cable modem has a port redirect of a particular port to the VPN, the OpenVPN server on my NAS. So I can VPN into my home network from anywhere. And then my eAccounts runs in, well, I've got copies of it on several of my OS2 systems, including the VM that's usually running on my laptop, even when I'm not at home. So what I can do is I can VPN in, then VNC or whatever to one of my OS2 systems, open eAccounts, and get my passwords. It's a little roundabout, and I'm sure most of my coworkers would be looking at me like, why would you jump through so many hoops?
When you
I'll
can
say-
just store your passwords in the
Yeah,
cloud.
and all I can say is, well, you know, when that online password cloud service gets hacked,
Yeah.
which of us is going to be saying,
Exactly.
that we're inconvenienced, right?
Exactly. You also use OS2 for your font development, correct?
No,
You don't.
I use it for my OS2 font development, my bitmap font development.
Just bitmap
Yeah,
fonts.
but the font development software, FontLab, does not run under OS2.
Ah, I thought that FontLab ran under OS2.
It's runs under Mac, runs under Windows.
Oh.
It's there is an open source font program called FontForge, which some
I
people use.
confused it with
That one, the GUI does not run under OS2. The backend does, but I mean, without a GUI, a font development backend is not really
Is the
useful.
GUI for that GTK?
Yes.
It is GTK. Yeah, that was the
Actually, no. It's a custom one that they wrote themselves. It looks kind of like GTK, but it's actually the author built an entire widget library themselves.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
and honestly, it is the ugliest thing you ever saw. I mean, it makes a TCL TK UI look smooth. But it's also very arcane to use. I wouldn't want to use it. I mean, Font Lab, I mean, yes, it is commercial software, but it's the industry standard, and it is pretty nice to use.
And your GIMP work, you use GIMP on,
I do occasionally use GIMP, more
oh,
often.
you more often use the Adobe.
No, I use Affinity, actually.
Oh, okay.
Which is an Adobe competitor that basically took off when Adobe went subscription only, and Affinity said, no, you buy a license for our software, it's good.
That's
So
nice, that's nice to know.
So it's become pretty competitive. They have pretty much the whole suite. They have the photo, the designer, the publisher, and stuff, and all that.
But that's commercial software,
It is
and
commercial
it runs
software.
on Windows.
Windows, Mac, and I think Linux. I'm not sure. Awesome. And there's some other stuff, because I mean, I've been getting into graphic design and photography a fair bit these days, and there is sadly a lot of the software that I can't run under OS2. So mostly OS2 is my development system, my system for the old favorite applications that I cannot give up, like e-accounts. PMU to an extent, although there is actually a Windows version of PMU.
There
Which
is.
is very nice. So yeah, I kind of live half and half, one foot in one foot in the other.
Gotcha, gotcha. And you run OS2 mostly virtualized these days?
Yes. I have several physical installations of OS2. My day-to-day machine is my laptop, which it does have a physical installation of OS2 on it. Generally, because I'm just having to switch back and forth between the aforementioned graphic apps and OS2 and other stuff,
It's just more
or a web browser.
convenient.
It is more convenient, and one of the other nice things about running this in a VM, especially since all of my files are basically on my NAS, so I can access them from anywhere anyway.
Mhm.
You know, I can spin up an ISO, just drop it into my shared folders, my VirtualBox shared folder directory,
Mhm.
flip back to the host OS, spin up another ISO, mount it, test it, spin up another VM, mount that, test it. I can use like UEFI,
Mhm.
VPN, VMs, getting my acronyms confused here. And then, yeah, there are disadvantages to running virtually, but there are also advantages too. So
Sure.
being able to just flip back and forth from one totally contained environment to another is very handy.
Okay, thank you, thank you. You wanna nudge Gordon there and see if he can contribute to this?
I should really pass because I'm too deaf to understand and follow the conversation that's gone on already. But I heard you say what we see for OS2 now and in the future.
Right now, today, we're discussing what you do with OS2 now.
What am I doing with OS2?
Correct, now.
I'm a very light user. I'm not a developer like most of the people in the room, but I use it for PN Mail. I use the Firefox browser. I use AnyPMD for developing Rex programs, and Mesa spreadsheet for keeping track of my personal finances. And that's about it. But what I would like to see is OS2 become a training platform for brand new Rex and C programmers. We got to get new people in.
We do have to do
Training
that.
platform.
Okay,
Yeah.
good point to make.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Martin.
I'm gonna move here to show on camera. Sorry. I'm going to move here to show on camera. Sorry.
Okay,
Okay.
ham it up, go for it.
Yeah. No. Well, I mostly use OS2 as a hobby and to support the site, the OS2 world, and to support people there when they have some issue, and also it's like my hobby to go testing applications that show up, and it's kind of fun to test like new releases of multimedia stuff that is working, that Greg is working on, and play videos and play stuff. So it's, for me right now, it's more like a hobby, and it's the community I belong to. Yeah, so.
So you don't use OS2 for work at all?
No, for work, no. for work, it's mostly spreadsheets. It's mostly some.
And the spreadsheets are in what? Microsoft Office.
Generally, it's Microsoft Office at work. Yeah.
Office 365.
Sorry.
Office 365.
And I like the downloaded version of Office.
Yes,
and-
I wonder why.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but I like, I don't like to work with stuff on the cloud. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, because when the connection goes down, then you can't get to any of your work to do, and
Not that it's like I have something that it has to be in my hard drive and I can back it. I still have the thing to back up things and have it stored in my place, and usually, well, the cloud service has a price, and if you don't pay after some time, they delete everything. So yeah, that's like, maybe it's because, well, I'm part of my generation that used to have everything backed and hard drives locally, and that's why I don't use the cloud.
well, you may get lucky on your flight home. You may pass by the cloud where some of your data is stored. Yeah, I mean,
Reach your hand
you
out.
never know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was there when I was flying. I saw it. Yeah.
I mean, you could test the theory by sending something to the cloud while you're on the plane and see,
Okay.
see it go.
Yeah.
Just a thought. Just a
Yeah.
thought.
But it's also fun to learn some stuff on OS2.
So you use OS2 for the enjoyment of using OS2.
Yeah.
I think most of us do, honestly.
What?
I think most of us do.
Yeah. It's,
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, certainly, those of us who have a choice about what to use at work, use it because we prefer to use it. So we use it because we like to use it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, anytime I boot Windows, I swear at it. So,
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
trying to keep my language nicer.
There is
you know,
that.
yeah.
There is that. You know, keeping
Me-
the amount in the curse jar low.
Yeah.
Yeah.
maybe I'm an operating system aficionado that likes to see different things and stuck with all and say, oh, OS2 is the one that I like. Yeah, because I like to see macOS. I learned macOS 7, 8, 9, and the 10. I like when see new releases of macOS, new releases of Windows, Haiku OS. I used to also like VOS, but well, it's like, yeah, I like to see what others has, but my choice is OS2. Yeah.
Got it.
I get that.
Yeah.
It, maybe because I was on the 90s in the OS war,
Right.
and when I was young, I say, okay, this is the,
Sure.
and it's stuck with me, yeah.
Understood.
Yeah.
Understood. Thank you very
Thanks.
much. Doug, you want to join into the conversation here?
And the question is?
The question is, the first part of the roundtable today, tomorrow we'll have the second part, but today's part is, what do you do with OS2, any flavor of OS2, today?
Today, I have 3 copies of AOS. One I have installed on a thin client. I have the networking from Warp Server for eBusiness installed on top of 5.01. Thank you, Alex. Alex has a little installation program that makes that possible. So that is my NAS. And I have in the house multiple machines that connect to it. I have Win 7, Win XP, Win 10, and MacBooks, plus 2 OS2 machines. I have a laptop here that I take when I have to go or when I'm confined to the chair. And then my main machine is a desktop. So they're all on bare hardware. And I use OS2 almost exclusively through the day. I switch to Windows when I need to browse. And the rest of the time I'm on OS2. And I was lucky in my professional life to end up slotting into a company that for a short period of time, OS2 was an approved vendor on their stuff. And so about 6 months or a year later, they took it off, but it was already there and they weren't going to take it away. So I've used it in work and home.
Understood. Great. Great. Wonderful. So you essentially use, so you do have you have flavors of Windows,
Yes,
but for your basic productivity, you're still using OS2.
yes. I mean, the Windows machines are either there because I have a piece of hardware that only has a driver for Windows.
Mhm.
I've got a scanner, for instance, that's in that category. I've got a flatbed scanner that I have a MacBook that I'm using for that
Mhm.
was passed down to me by my daughter, and I've got a Windows 7 machine connected to my TV that I use for Netflix and
Mhm.
Amazon and stuff like that. The rest of it's all OS2.
Gotcha. Understood. All right, wonderful. Well, thank you. Martin, do we have anyone online who would like to contribute?
Yes, we have GTA,
Okay.
GT, JT, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. I
Okay.
know.
Yeah. My exact use for OS2 is to resurrect all other versions of OS2 OSs, 1.x up to Warp 4 and ArcaOS, as each runs in a virtual machine under the ATOF host OS.
Mhm.
It's his ongoing
Hopefully, out of
project.
that group, ArcaOS does not need to be resurrected.
Yeah, okay. With that out of the way, now I can bring back any older DOS, Windows, or OS2 application
Mhm.
and get more use out of it. The
Mhm.
application is running on a VM tailored to the time
Right.
the app was in existence, so in general it works perfectly. You can therefore get more life out of all OS and all applications.
Right.
Yeah, that's
I know that JT's focus is on running virtual machines.
We also have DG
Mhm.
on the YouTube chat. I use OS2 at work for supporting Windows and Linux users administering Windows servers. There's one server under OS2, and it says mail, DNS, etc.
Mhm.
Configuring network equipment, switches via terminal and web interface. The main software for me is RDP, the remote desktop
Yeah.
protocol, client, BNC client, and server. RS-232 terminal, Thunderbird, and Firefox. Also, graphic schemes is in one of the Java applications. Yeah, that's what DG say, and we have Neil
Yes.
Waldhauer. I don't,
Mhm.
maybe I'm pronouncing it right. I use ArcaOS to support my OS2 consulting businesses. I sell a few ArcaOS preloaded computers, especially to business that uses OS2. Yeah, I'm using. Neil also says, I'm also using Windows 11 and some Linux when I needed current web browser or Zoom, Slack, etc.
Mhm.
Okay. That's it. What I have.
All right. I should probably toss in here, just so everyone knows. Everyone expects that I use OS2 on a daily basis, and I do. My entire office runs OS2. We have a small office. My brother and I practice accounting together, as well as running ArcaOS, ArcaNoe. And we both have ArcaOS on our desktops. And we have an intern who works with us now. And she's a college sophomore, and she is using ArcaOS on her desktop at work. So we use it almost exclusively for email, web browsing in general, and word processing. And our client write-up software, where we do monthly or quarterly or annual financial statement preparation for clients, is a DOS application, which runs beautifully under ArcaOS on machines that can run DOS sessions, which is one of the reasons that he and I have both been using T43s for such an extended period of time. Now that ArcaOS 5.1 is out with the ability to run those DOS sessions on hardware natively again, the T590 will be my next. I'm halfway moved into it now. I'm sort of working on both machines right now.
Oh, I know that.
But the DOS sessions work really well on it. We do have 2 virtualized Windows servers in the office. One is a 2007 server. Actually, I lied. We have 3 virtualized Windows servers. Really, one is an XP virtual machine running under VirtualBox that has the Server 2003 terminal services components patched into it, because I don't mind hacking Windows as much as required. So that functions sort of as a Server 2003 instance. There are only a couple of things that run on that, and the only reason that is still up and running on the network is that software will not run under Server 2008 Release 2, which is the second Windows server that we have virtualized. And on that one, I typically do the web browsing that I can't do on my OS2 desktop. And I connect to that using our desktop from Digi. So it gets me a remote desktop terminal session, and I run that on a virtual desktop on my OS2 machine. And that's up I have 8 virtual desktops configured, and that's the far right one in the upper corner that I use, and that's dedicated to that remote desktop session. So when I'm in the office, I fire that up. Yeah.
What's the thing you said? There was a term I didn't.
Our desktop.
Okay.
There are 2 remote desktops that use RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol. There's our desktop and free RDP. Digi has ported both of them to OS2 for us. I still am using our desktop. Free RDP is probably a bit more modern. But our desktop
That's a
works.
client on the OS2.
That's a client on the OS2 side, and that will connect to a Windows server, just like a Windows machine would connect to that server and open up a desktop or a published application. I also have a very, very, very old Windows Server 2000 Advanced running Citrix MetaFrame 1.8.
Wow.
For applications that won't run under Server 2003, Server 2008, or Server 2019. So those things still hang around. But I'm very careful with what I do with it. That virtual server does not go out to the internet. And again, for that, I use the native OS2 Citrix client to access that one. And that works quite well. And that Citrix client is still available for download from Citrix, and you can use it to connect to any MetaFrame servers that you might have. MetaFrame natively uses the ICA protocol, but it can also use RDP protocol. It just doesn't support the more modern functionality of RDP on the later Windows Server versions. And then the last Windows Server instance that we run is Server 2019. It's also running under VirtualBox, and our income tax preparation software runs on that because it requires Windows 10 or above. So I had to stop everything that I was doing and implement Server 2019 because I could not install that year's software. That was year before last, I guess. I had to install that on something newer than Server 2008. So we implemented Server 2019.
What tax software do you run? TurboTax or something else?
Right now we're using Drake.
Drake?
Drake software. We used to use ProSystem FX from CCH, but it became just too costly. So we're using Drake software right now, which is much more economical. It took, I'm going to say this as diplomatically as I can, it took some getting used to. The user interface, over the years, I've spent way too much time in involved conversations with Alex. And my appreciation for common user access has grown to the point of being obsessive. So when I have to deal with an application that has no consistent user interface, it's like nails down a blackboard to me. And there is some software, namely on Windows, and I'm seeing it on Linux now, where the application designer just had no thought whatsoever into the organization of the menus, the main menu structure if there's a menu at the top, everything's that silly hamburger menu. I say to my brother, you have to open the hamburger menu. He says, what do you mean the hamburger menu? And I have to go through the whole thing. I said, no, you see the 3 little bars at the top? So, the Drake software is not very CUA 91 compliant, or Microsoft's take on that was CUA 95. Am I correct?
I'm not sure what Microsoft did with it, to be
They
honest.
had a name for it. I think it was CUA 95.
Really? I didn't know they had a standard. Certainly nobody seems to use it.
Nobody seems to use it, exactly. And this software, although it is functionally quite competent and produces a good result, can be very frustrating when I need to find where I have to input something or how to input something. But I have to run that in a virtual machine running Windows. That is my exposure to Windows in my office. For browsing, whatever will not run in CMonkey 235. I'm using CMonkey 235B on my desktop because my T43 runs it slightly better than the later CMonkey that we ship with ArcaOS.
That's 230, that's 235?
The one that I'm using is 235B. Yeah. B,
B.
as in boy.
Boy, okay.
Is that 2.35?
2.35B.
Excuse me, what is that?
That's the version of CMonkey that I'm using on
CMonkey is what?
browser and email.
It's like a.
It's like Netscape Communicator.
It looks like.
Do you remember Netscape?
Yeah, but I never used it.
What did you use to browse the internet 20 years ago?
Okay, so it was probably on my screen, but then better things came along. I forget.
Netscape Communicator was the first browser suite. And it included a web browser, an email client, a news reader, and an HTML composer.
Okay, so I never used any of those things, and the reason, as I recall, and I think it's still valid, is these suites did not, for the email, so I'm a heavy user of email.
Yes.
And even now I call Thunderbird or something, they put all the emails
Yes.
in one file. Whereas the wonder of PM mail is
This is true.
everything is an ASCII file.
You are not going to get any argument from me on MBox format. I don't like it. On my mail server, which is running OS2, it's running ArcaOS as a matter of fact. Communicate Pro, which is commercial email software for OS2, is running MDIR format, MailDIR format. So every message that comes in is a single file under a directory.
This has saved me many times. I can go in.
Well, yeah, because if
and look at the file.
true, and if you have a severe problem with your hard drive, you can recover most of your messages. Whereas if you have a 1.5 gigabyte MBox file and it's damaged, there goes your inbox.
Yes.
because that's it.
That's why I never used any of those programs.
But
What, can I ask, that Communicate Pro thing, does it provide anything besides email server?
Communicate Pro?
Communicate, yeah.
Communicate Pro provides email, it provides SIP services.
Which is, what's that?
SIP is voice over IP. It provides chat services.
What
So-
about FTP, does it provide that?
It can provide that, and it can provide personal web pages for people. I don't use those functions, and I also don't use the SIP functionality in it, but I could.
What FTP server do you, like when I'm connecting to Warpstock, what?
I use Peter Moylan's FTP server.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So on my desktop, because that's what I'm focused on right now, I use SeaMonkey for my web browsing and for my email. Because for email, there are some major differences between SeaMonkey and Thunderbird. Thunderbird is like SeaMonkey without the thinking man's part in it. In other words, SeaMonkey is email for thinking people. 5-minute warning? Okay. So, SeaMonkey, of course, has issues with newer websites that make heavy use of JavaScript. A lot of JavaScript controls don't work, so you'll see a plus to expand a menu and you click on it and nothing happens. So I'll switch over to that Windows 2008 Release 2 server instance, and I'll run the latest version of Pale Moon generally on that, and the last version of Chrome, official Chrome, that runs on Windows 7. Sometimes there are some pages that will not open in either of those two browsers. And the version of Pale Moon is the one that was just released this month. And I can tell you the Chase Bank will not open in that browser.
Do you use Linux?
I do use Linux. I use OpenSUSE Linux.
And you don't use a browser on there?
When I have a remote session to a Linux machine, yeah. It's just easier when I have a remote desktop session to have Windows 7 machine to just use Windows 7. Now, I could set up remote connectivity to my Linux boxes and use that, and it would probably be more comfortable for me to do that. For the Chase Bank side, I have to actually use the latest version of Firefox, which uses the quantum rendering engine.
What is the function that forces you, that prevents the old browsers from working in that case?
The function
That change requires.
mind you, Pale Moon is not an old browser, and the version of Chrome that's running on that machine, Server 2008, which is based on Windows 7, is not that far removed from the latest version of Chrome. So we're not talking about old browsers. It's JavaScript. It is all JavaScript on the server side that does not render properly in the browser.
What does it get for Chase Bank? I'm trying to understand why the engineers say we're going to diverge from industry standards. What are they getting for their bosses?
Security probably guarantees.
They think that they're getting a security out of it. Yeah.
Also, it's the current, level of JavaScript, so
Yeah, it is a standard. It's
why
just
would
that
you
they're
not use
using
it?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The problem with JavaScript is that JavaScript is rather unforgiving. So if you're coding to the latest standard of JavaScript, there is really no fallback that says, if the browser reports that it cannot render this, then render this expander this way. There's no mechanism to do that.
Yeah, but the professional coding standards, things should be backward compatible.
Thank you.
Well,
That's the IBM thinking.
Yeah,
That does not prevail anymore. It just doesn't. So I have the latest Firefox on that particular machine so that I can open up, and I only have to go there for one thing. One thing.
maybe you need a new bank?
Well, I don't really use it. I mean, it's like once a month I have to go there, and I don't spend a lot of time with it. But Firefox, the latest version of Firefox was not an issue for me. I don't like what they've done to Firefox, so I don't use the latest Firefox on anything else.
I complain when I run into something like this. I was at the Tufts Dental School getting some dental care done. I couldn't log on to their network. It said, you're using Windows 7. We won't allow anybody on Windows 7 to log on to this network.
Yeah.
So I said, what's the problem? They said, it's insecure. I said, listen, that's my problem. It's not your problem.
Right. There are arguments to the contrary. In other words,
Name one.
if I am providing access to your sensitive information, and I know that a particular web browser has been shown to be easily compromised, and I allow you to access that data, and that data is coming from my server, and I don't block you from doing it, there may be some culpability on my part. Now, I could warn you, and you could make the argument that the warning is enough, but like I said before about if I were...
Newspaper, no.
Well, it's like what I said yesterday about opening up a restaurant. I would open up a restaurant that said, you know, our food is poison, do not eat here. And we use peanut oil in all of our fryers. And then anyone who wanted to eat there, we've made a full disclosure. So apparently you don't mind getting sick. So, you know, you can't really, you don't have to worry about being sued in that regard.
So it took an hour to get the answer. You know, they just could have brought up an error message saying you're using an old operating system. You know, the idea of backward compatibility. And I talk to these kids; they don't know anything.
They're using the standard built-in controls that come in the toolkits that they're using.
I have two questions about your setup. What do you use for firewall, and how do you back up the system? If there's no time now.
Right, and that's not part of this discussion. The overarching point that I'm trying to make is that I do use OS2, specifically ArcaOS, every single day to make a living. I word process in it, I use OpenOffice, I run my email in it, I run my accounting program in it, I view and print PDFs in it, and whatever I can't do on that platform, then I do on other platforms. But I connect to those other platforms remotely, so I don't have to dual boot, and I don't have to have 15 machines running on my desk, although I do have 15 machines running on my desk. Now, typically I only have two or three computers. The other thing I'm finding myself doing a lot, what was that?
Air conditioning building.
Yeah. The other thing I find myself doing a lot these days, instead of falling back to Windows for my browser, is I just use my phone.
Yeah.
I just use my phone.
You can do most stuff with it.
Exactly. Unless the interface is such that it's one of these responsive interfaces that cuts half the menu down to streamline it for use on a phone, it's often easier to do that than to switch over to the Windows instance. So
Yeah.
that's another option.
Yeah, honestly, since I picked up this like tablet for $70 or something last year, I find myself just using it for browsing.
Yeah, exactly. When my HP touchpad was current and the browser was current and it handled JavaScript on it, you think that we have problems with JavaScript? You ain't seen nothing yet. Because the browser in the HP touchpad running WebOS is almost unusable. But I used to do a lot of stuff on that little browser. I kept it on a stand on my desk. Well, it's still on a stand on my desk. But I used to use that for browsing web because it was convenient. Clearly, I don't use ArcaOS for video conferencing. When we were locked out during the pandemic, I had to use a Windows machine for that. Even the Linux machine didn't work for me because Skype for Linux was outdated at that point, and they hadn't released a new one that worked on their latest protocol.
You didn't use Zoom?
No, because I don't like my image going to China. So I did not use Zoom, and I do not use Zoom now. And I tell clients specifically that I really, really, really would prefer not to do any video conferencing. I don't like video conferencing. If we're going to have a discussion, I'd like to have a discussion either in my office or over a meal. So, but that's just me because, you know, I believe in doing spycraft the old-fashioned. I mean, I believe in doing business the old-fashioned.
One last thing, I don't want to keep the session going.
Yeah.
But do you have any intention to maybe commission some tax software to be written for us to see what to do?
I have thought about it and thought about it and thought about it, and I've also thought about what I would do if I were to write an accounting program. Oh, by the way, I also manage my checkbook on ArcaOS. I use MoneyDance, an older version of MoneyDance that runs in Java 1.6. And yeah, it's terrific. It works great for me. I can't run QuickBooks on it natively, so I have to run QuickBooks on that Server 2019 instance. And I don't even, that's a whole other topic as to what people do with QuickBooks.
It's evil software.
Oh, geez, it's just awful. I mean, it's like handing a Swiss Army knife to a 3-year-old. I mean, what could go wrong? But yeah, so that's kind of my use for the operating system now. No video conferencing, but other than that, I do pretty much all of my daily functions under ArcaOS.
For daily computer functions.
No, all of my daily functions.
I just took care of that.
Bathroom powered by OS.
But I even, I get some electronic copies of magazines as PDFs. And I use Lucid. I use Lucid almost exclusively for reading PDFs.
Oh yeah, me too if I have a choice.
Yeah, if given the choice, that's what I do.
I seriously consider trying to port Lucid to other platforms like Linux or whatever. Just because even Linux PDF viewers are, I hate most of them.
They're klutzy. They're very klutzy.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I don't like them at all.
What is the name of the program?
Lucid,
Oh,
PDF viewer.
You know, I just wish that one was drag and drop. I wish I could drag it to my printer like I do with the describe file.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. If you have a PDF sitting on your desktop, if you could drag that to your printer.
It should be possible to.
No, it doesn't work because the
Possible
printer
to
will
read something.
will print the raw PDF data. Is what happens.
Even if it's even if the printer is pointing to a cups PDF queue, because cups can have
That's
PDF
true.
data.
If you have a CUPS PDF queue configured, it would probably interpret the PDF properly and print that out for you. But I know exactly what you mean because I've tried that experiment myself and I end up with, oh, that's raw PDF, isn't it?
I love to take my students and take a describe file and say, here, watch this, and drag it to the printer, and it prints out their lab manual
Yeah.
or something they need. Say, yeah, try that under any other OS. Try
That's-
that. Go ahead.
Yeah, can I just tell a very quick anecdote? So I was assisting, one of my first jobs was assisting as a LAN administrator on a Warp server network. And the main admin was, you know, she knew her way around OS2 reasonably well because it was her day job, but she obviously wasn't like super instinctively familiar with it. So there was one time where a printer went down, one of the LAN printers went down, and we were down in the server room at the server looking at the print queues, and all of the jobs for this printer were queuing up, and we were like, well, we should just move these jobs to another printer. And she said, yeah, that's a good idea, but how do I do that? She's like, is there like a settings thing somewhere? And I just said, no, let me. I just highlighted all of the jobs in that print queue, dragged them to another print queue, done. And her jaw hit the floor.
Exactly. You can't do that on any other platform.
It's very object oriented.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why I'm here. No, that's
I mean, you might be able to do that on a Mac. I've really not looked at the Mac print queue
Oh,
closely.
and by the way, I had never done that before. I just assumed it would work, and it did.
Yeah. I can tell you this, that also works for jobs that are being sent to NetWare print queues. You can do that using the native OS2 spooler and just drag it, and the NetWare client handles the whole thing and talks on the back end to the NetWare print subsystem, and it just works like any other printer for you. It's very, very easy to do. All right, so I'm over time. This will conclude our first part of this roundtable. Think about what you might want to do with OS2 in the future if it could do X. Because I'll be very interested to hear those answers tomorrow. I will. Because a lot of these things shape the direction of ArcaOS. And sometimes it's something I can say, well, I don't see that happening. Or sometimes I'll say, yes, if you can find a third party to do that, that would be a wonderful thing to do. And maybe I can help find a third party to do that. You never know. So that's it. Thank you very much.
What's the schedule?
The schedule for tomorrow? Tomorrow's schedule, thank you, by the way. Tomorrow's schedule is that.
Can we have a 10-minute break before your talk?
What do you think? I mean, I can just take the time out of your next session.
You can take the time out of my next session. No problem. No problem.
Yeah, I'll probably need a few minutes to set up my computer anyway, so.
So that's tomorrow. We can run over tomorrow and discuss a lot of extra stuff if we like. Okay?
By the way, you know,